searches and that kind of stuff, or did you already did you kind of know about Lyme?
I pieced it. I knew nothing about Lyme, and so
Uh-huh.
I learned about it, and I watched Anjali Van Lanen, an Olympic skier who was living in Bellingham.
Oh,
I watched her
but
video,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and I was like, okay. I was like, that's my final. Like everything she said, I said at one point, and so I was like, I have Lyme disease. And then,
Yeah.
he was kind of like, no, there's no ticks here. You don't have Lyme, but I'll test you for it through the ELISA test. And so of course, that came back negative, and they called me and they were like, yep, yep, see, you don't have Lyme. And at that point, I knew no one was going to help me. I was like, no one has helped me. I've been on my own struggling with this for so long.
Yeah.
Who is going to help me? And I just started researching, and then that's when I discovered the Lyme literate community and the Lyme literate doctors, and then that's when I went to a Lyme literate doctor in Seattle, and I got tested through the IgNix test, and that was CDC negative but IgNix positive. Uh,
Oh,
so then I took that test back to the rheumatoid doctor, and I was like,
yeah.
so I actually have Lyme disease. I was right. And she was like, She was like, well, when you're all done with that, here's this pamphlet on a rheumatoid drug that you'll probably need in the future. And she like gave me paperwork for a prescription rheumatoid drug, and I walked out of there like, oh my god. Okay.
You
I,
didn't care
yeah.
about the Lyme at all.
No, it was just basically like, well, when you don't get healed from that, you'll need this
Oh,
drug in the future. It was kind of like that kind of attitude, I think.
yeah. So when did you actually get the Lyme diagnosis? Was that in
Um,
20? Oh gosh.
November of 2014, so just about 5 years in.
Wow. And so did you, okay, 5 years since you got sick, and also 5 years ago, around now.
Yeah, so it's been about a decade.
Wow. Um, and so did you start treating Lyme then in end of 2014?
I did.
After the,
I did, yeah. I saw a Lyme literate doctor down in Seattle, and we started me on high dosages of antibiotics. And I basically did that for 2.5 years, and then I stopped. And I knew there was some major problems not being addressed with my treatment. And so
yeah.
we stopped, and I relapsed. And I knew I
Oh,
needed, um,
sorry, you didn't respond to the antibiotics then.
they were making me feel better while I was on them. I was, the whole time I was still working and doing stuff, and,
Oh,
but I
yeah.
was, it's so hard to tell what's actually going on until you get off of them. And so they helped. Like, I think when I got bicillin injections, and I was so messed up in my brain, that the bicillin injections are intramuscularly, and I think those
I don't
helped.
think that.
They are. It's a penicillin type that they inject into your muscles and your glutes. And
Wow. So did you do oral ones as well, or did you just do injections?
I did all oral, and then just the bicillin injection. So I never did any IV, but the injections are similar to IV because they do work intramuscularly, so they can break the blood-brain barrier and go up into your brain, um, where that seemed to help me the most with my brain function. I mean, I was like, I couldn't read, couldn't write. It was bad, couldn't speak.
Um,
Um, and so I do feel like those injections helped a lot, because my brain kind of cleared up after that. And the antibiotics, I believe they saved my life at the time, because I was so ill,
wow.
so sick, that I feel like, I needed to lessen the load of bacteria in my body, and I feel like the antibiotics did save me from, who knows, but they did not cure me. My own body had to kind of fix itself to cure itself.
Yeah.
And so I left the doctor in Seattle after I I learned more about mold, and I learned more about mast cell activation syndrome, and I already had some genetic defects, and so I knew we weren't touching on all the bases. I knew my body needed more support, and so
Yeah.
I found a Lyme literate doctor in Canada, who I started seeing. And my Lyme doctor was convinced that I had Bartonella, and I wasn't. And so we kept treating it and treating it and treating it, but really the underlying problem, I think, was being exposed to mold. Like everywhere I lived, I was exposed to mold. And
that's
so
so hard up here. I feel like it's just moldy everywhere.
it's everywhere. And even now that I'm in Spokane, everyone's like, oh, it's dry there. It doesn't matter. There's so much snow on the rooftops in the winter that the roofs are leaking. Like there's mold everywhere. It's hard to avoid.
Is that why you moved there? Is because it was more dry?
No, I moved here for a dumb boy.
Different story.
Yeah, that's a whole different story. But I went up to Seattle, and I started working with the Lyme literate doctor up there, and he started addressing, we treated mold internally. We honed in on mast cell activation syndrome, which is a huge component with people with chronic illness. And we started treating that. And as soon as we started treating that, my body settled down, and I went out of, it was like I relapsed, and then I went right into feeling better again after treating that.
Wow. How did you treat that?
I was taking cromolyn sodium, which is a medication that stabilizes the mast cells in your gut. So I started taking that at first, and then I was taking quercetin and doing a few other things to kind of lower histamine levels, because I was very allergic with my Lyme disease, and when you're very allergic, it tends to be like a mast cell thing that gets activated.
You knew that from all the food intolerances and stuff?
Oh my gosh, you have no idea what I went through. This is crazy. So at one point, everything I ate, was breaking me out in rashes. And it was like I would have a smoothie one day and I'd be fine. And the next day I'd have the same smoothie and my eyeballs would swell,
Oh my God.
So I started to take a pin, and I would break the skin on my forearm, and I would take the food I was about to eat, and I would wipe it on my forearm on that scratch, and I would grade the welt that I would get on a scale of 1 to 10. And if it was any higher than a 5, I wouldn't eat it. So I basically had to live my life scraping food on my arms. Yeah, I have photos of that. I would make notes and keep a chart, and that's how I had to function in the world. I did a low FODMAP diet so that my stomach wouldn't bloat. It was insane,
Wow.
Yeah.
How
And
did that affect you with going out? Would it just be really scary to leave the house and if something happened?
I would, for one, I would, it was I was so used to stuff happening to me. When I started to lose my vision, I was like, oh, one eye, I can't see on one eye again. Oh, well, hopefully it'll be back tomorrow. Every day something new and crazy was happening to me that it wasn't even phasing me anymore. It was oh, another rash on my body. Oh, my eye swelled. Oh, my throat's swelling. I had EpiPens, but
Oh, you did?
Yeah, but to me, it just became the normal, and I just functioned. I still wanted a life. I still needed to be working. And so I just did my best to try to maintain some kind of normalcy, really.